Okay, I am lucky enough to talk to Bush here. I'm going to make sure that I'm not lighting my best ball mania entries on fire and that I actually have a real shot to do stuff. Okay, so Bush, this is something I've talked about in my live streams recently a little bit. So I feel like this year in Underdog, I think it's kind of been similar in years past as well, where obviously Underdog drafts are very different in that the market has corrected and they understand that a lot of these like running backs that project out to get volume just because it looks like they will on paper, they're not actually super exciting. That volume's not safe and they may not necessarily be league winners. Like go back a couple years ago, you have like the Mike Davis guys going in round 5, whereas now those guys going around like 10, 11 on Underdog, right? So it's like the market has corrected where if I'm just going to pull up the ADP right
I mean,
now.
Zamir White is the premier example to me of like who would have been a dead zone running back 5 years ago.
Exactly. I mean, and if you look at, and nothing against Kyron Williams himself, but just more so like the overall ADP aspect of this, Kyron Williams, the RB8, and the guys going ahead of him are Malik Neighbors, DK Metcalf, DJ Moore, Cooper Kupp. Like the tight end 1 off the board is going after the first 25 wide receivers. The QB1's going after the first 26 receivers. So how I am kind of viewing these drafts at the moment is that wide receivers on the whole are overtly expensive, but they are in every single round. So it doesn't matter because you still have to take them. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think it's almost like the dynamic used to be that we used to talk about this all the time. It's like if you draft a running back, who's RB9 or RB10 off the board with the 11th overall pick in your redraft league, you're better suited taking the wide receiver 1 or 2 off the board because you're going to have that advantage at wide receiver that the people who picked 101 to 103 have at running back because they got the best running back projections. Whereas now, like you said, am I drafting the wide receiver 25 off the board over the QB1 or the tight end 1 or whatever? But at the same time, the dynamic is such that everybody is in agreement that wide receivers should go high, that I am so much more likely now to get that advantage at wide receiver early in my drafts, rounds 1, round 2. So I'm not forced to take, in my opinion, subpar projections like Jaden Reed, who would be a 9th round pick in most other years, in round 5 because the room said that I had to take him in round 5 when I have a top 10 running back projection on the board, or I have my QB1 on the board, or I have my tight end 1 on the board.
That's exactly where I'm at. So like my analogy that I have this year is like drafting your wide receivers is kind of like eating your vegetables. I'm never on the clock and I'm super excited to do it. Like I'm on the clock and I'm saying, oh my gosh, I really would rather take Sam Laporta over Zay Flowers. I would way rather have Jalen Hurts over George Pickens, but I'm kind of viewing that running back, tight ends, quarterback in the first 6 or 7 rounds. I think once you get to round 8, like running backs flip and you have to kind of go with those positions. But I feel like through the first 7 rounds, it's like I'm never excited to take these receivers. I want to go the other positions, but you're kind of forced to. So what I've been doing is what I was previously doing, which I've kind of walked back just because the CMC upside's nuts, is I was going Lamb over McCaffrey for a little bit just because I feel so much better about my starts when I go wide receiver round 1. But I've walked that back. And essentially what I'm doing is with every turn, I'm making myself get at least 1 receiver. Whether it's in rounds 1 or 2, I cannot go running back out the gate, or my build will never make sense. Whether it's like rounds 2 and 3, it's anytime I try to go Jonathan Taylor, then Kyron Williams, I love it through the first 3 rounds, but then my draft falls apart by the time I get to round 6. So generally what I've been trying to do is get 1 receiver in rounds 1 and 2 minimum, 1 receiver in rounds 3 and 4 minimum, 1 receiver in rounds 5 and 6 minimum. Because then once you get to like round 7 and 8, I would say especially round 8, it's like, am I really going to take Jameson Williams instead of Aaron Jones, or Jameson Williams instead of Kyler, or Jameson instead of Evan Ingram, which I just can't do.
No, and I believe that the wide receiver dead zone has formed very firmly where Jameson Williams is the first name in the wide receiver dead zone for me, where I am not drafting receivers really for a couple rounds after that, because until I really get to the like Jalen Polk area of the board at wide receiver, I like the running back, quarterback, and tight end projections better. That's simply why I'm kind of foregoing that. I think the edge comes this year where, yeah, structurally, it's nice to have 4 wide receivers through the first like 5 rounds, for example. You make one deviation for an elite quarterback, one deviation for an elite running back, or an elite tight end, or, at most, maybe you grabbed a running back and a quarterback in the first 5 rounds. But to me, round 1 to 5 is the area that you want to load up at your wide receivers. But I actually think the wide receiver dead zone is starting to form earlier and earlier because we're pushing up subpar projections who might be wide receiver 2s on subpar offenses or wide receiver 3s on good offenses. Up the board, where you're still getting good running back, quarterback, and tight end projections. So it is really challenging. And I would say this year, more so than any other year, hitting on a sleeper wide receiver would be massive for your wide receiver. Because like my attitude towards wide receiver, it's been this way the whole time, is I'm going to draft good receivers. Like as simple as this draft strategy might sound, I'm going to draft the best projection on the board. Like whoever projects better, I'm going to draft. But I will favor wide receivers early because I know that the avalanche is coming. I know I'm not going to be able to get great wide receivers in round 9 like I used to get Garrett Wilson when he was a rookie in round 9, round 10, where he was going. So what I need to do now is I grab 4 or 5 good wide receivers before the 8th, 9th round is over, and I am picking my spots to take dart throws really carefully. I'm not just doing it for correlation anymore. I'm going to correlate other position groups better, so that I don't have to draft, say, Marvin Mims because I don't believe in him because I drafted Cortland Sutton already and I need to double stack the backdoor Bo Nix or whatever. Like I'm just going to really think through what wide receivers can be this year's Tank Dells and Jaden Reeds. Because if you do hit on 1 or 2 of those guys on one team and you did draft, say, 2 or 3 absolute anchors at the top, and your running back or quarterback and tight end positions are strong as a result because you didn't overpower wide receivers round 5 through round 9, then you're going to be in a position that those wide receivers are going to be huge win rated and advance rate pieces.
Do you have any names that you like this year that could be those players? And I don't know if I'm just like, I don't want to say getting burnt out, but I've been like die hard. I started playing fantasy football way before this, but in terms of like when I started playing Dynasty and started only thinking about fantasy football from the time I woke up, went to bed 365 days a year. It's like 2014. So it's going on 10 years. So I don't know if I'm like less excited than I used to be or something, or I'm just less confident in myself because I've whipped on so many of these like late round sleepers in the past. But it's like almost impossible for me to now, at least this year, see someone like after wide receiver 70, like because like Adam Thielen's going around like 13, 14. You know what I mean? So it's like, who after Adam Thielen are you getting excited about? Like, let me share the screen here real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I have a number of names that I've been pretty excited about. Again, my excitement for them comes that the edge that you get for hitting on a late round receiver becomes so much more amplified this year, more so than other years, because yeah, I know what you mean to some degree. It's like, hey, I've whiffed, like Rashad Bateman's on the board right now. Like I literally whiffed on Rashad Bateman a couple of years ago, and like a number of other prospects there. Is Roman Wilson getting me excited? Is Malachi Corley getting excited? Is Troy Franklin getting me excited? I mean, yes, like guys like Franklin specifically, he's currently my highest rostered wide receiver so far. But the excitement for me comes upon predicting the role correctly, getting the spike weeks correctly, because I think the unique thing about Underdog specifically is that you don't have to choose when to start these players. So drafting players like Michael Wilson, for example, make no sense in a standard redraft league, because it's like, if Michael Wilson is good, he'll pop up on the waiver wire at some point. He'll be a guy that has a couple good target games, maybe scores a couple touchdowns or whatever, and then you pick him up at that point. But in Underdog, you kind of have to predict that before it happens. And guys like Michael Wilson, who have solidified starting roles, like I feel very confident Arizona is going to have him out there in 2 or 3 wide receiver sets. They become anchors that could really be good for you to build out your wide receiver depth, because if he gives you 5 or 6 spike weeks at a 17th round price tag or whatever, he's going to end up being huge for you. So that's the difference for me at wide receiver, is that I'm thinking way more about roles than I used to versus other years. Before, it was like, I will only draft upside at wide receiver. Unless they're a rookie or some big, fast, athletic guy, I'm not drafting. I would never click the button on Wan'Dale Robinson ever 5 years ago. But now I'm like, if he has a solidified role and it's an offense maybe that's underpriced or whatever. You get into the whole projection mindset of it. But the role is something I'm way more focused on at wide receiver specifically, whereas running back has now become the position where it's mostly upside based.
Okay, that's really interesting because I mean, if I am I looking at these guys, and maybe it's that I've just seen like a thousand of these profiles turn out to be just absolutely zeros, but really like the only guys that I can maybe get excited about in the later rounds here, like someone I've taken a ton of is like DJ Chark. I've taken some Odell too, just chasing guys that I don't know if I'm falling into the trap of just chasing the name that I've actually seen be productive before and know that they're in good offenses. Where it's so much harder for me to look at someone like Jalen Tolbert and go, he's done nothing for years. I didn't like him as a prospect. Like, what is there actually there?
Yeah, I think, again, the edge will come as if he has a role. Like if he is a starting outside receiver for the Cowboys, which he probably won't be because Cooks is still there and him and Lamb are probably established as the two guys. So Tolbert may be a bad example for this, but just looking at guys to me, and training camp will be massive for this, that have solidified roles is no more important in best ball than it's ever been, because running backs, I mean, we just play into chaos with running back. It's like I'm drafting a ton of like Audric Estime, Damian Pierce, guys like that, because I know the chaos of the running back position during an NFL season. If Javonte Williams, who's dealt with injuries, if Joe Mixon, who's older and has a lot of touches under his belt, deal with injuries, the upside for Audric Estime, who was a prospect that I like, the upside for Damian Pierce, who was a prospect that I liked, a rookie that I liked, and then subsequently a guy that I drafted a little bit of last year and who failed. If those guys do find starting roles, it's pretty easy to attach that. But a wide receiver, anybody that has a starting role in a good offense who's shown something before is being drafted in the first 6 rounds. So now you kind of have to really follow camp reports, really follow training camp and that kind of thing to know who's going to be on the field, because wide receivers taking a 0 is going to be a big time, portfolio decline for you this year, more so than other years, because you're not getting guys that have massive upside everywhere. You have to get guys that produce weeks for you.
Can we go through real quick and look at these guys in the early rounds that aren't at wide receiver that you think have the upside to actually really move the needle and turn in one of those league winning guys? Because I mean, I think a typical start, at least through the first 6 rounds, is for me, is I have a running back, a quarterback, or a running back, a tight end, and then 4 receivers. You know what I mean? And
Right.
I think at least for me in the early rounds, I think the key is going to be to identify when you're allowed to pivot from the receiver and if you can hit on that one right running back or hit on that one correct quarterback or that one correct tight end. So like I guess we don't need to talk about CMC. Personally, what I've been doing with Bijan and Brees, I prefer Brees over Bijan, but I agree that they're in the same tier, and I take them at ADP. I'm willing to take them over Brown, over Puka, over Wilson.
Me too.
It's the same thing there with you. Is there any shot you're taking him over like St. Brown or Jefferson?
I will in redraft leagues, in home
redraft
leagues,
agree,
and stuff like that, but not on Underdog. No, I won't.
Okay. What about Gibbs? Because Gibbs falls in a weird line where I think once you have Puka off the board, for me, I think Puka goes and there's a teardrop at receiver. I think Garrett Wilson's like in his own little a tiny tier, but then once you go to Marvin London, for me, I kind of see all these wide receivers the same. I see wide receiver 9 through wide receiver about 13, 14, maybe even a little bit further as all the same. So I'm taking Gibbs ahead of these guys relatively easily. Where I am taking Jonathan Taylor personally is on a team where I did not go Bijan, Brees, or Gibbs. I can't go Bijan and Taylor. I'm not going Brees and Taylor. I've tried it before, and I just hate my teams when I do it, So I'll go Taylor in round 2 only whenever I went wide receiver round 1.
Yeah, again, structurally, I want to have 2 wide receivers in the first 3 rounds. So if I deviate for Bijan or Brees or Gibbs or Taylor, I need the other 2 picks that I made to be wide receiver. So, I mean, you typically get Gibbs near the turn. So if you have the 112 or if you have the 109 or whatever, and you took, say, Puka or Garrett Wilson or AJ Brown with that first pick, and then you swing back around and Gibbs falls back to you, then usually at the top of round 3, I'm probably aiming for another receiver again, Cooper Kupp, DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Malik Neighbors, whoever ends up falling back to me. So my attitude on the early round running backs across the board, really, Bijan, Brees, Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, and Saquon Barkley, is that I will draft one of them as my hero RB, but unless I got an obscene ADP value, like I grab Christian McCaffrey at 101 and Saquon is on the board at the 24th pick, I'm probably not drafting 2 straight running backs because, like you said, I don't like my teams when that happens. And even with Taylor, like Taylor's the one I take the least out of this group. And it's mainly because I'm only drafting him after ADP because I actually do quite like the projections of Harrison, of London, even of Ayuk, Collins, Olave, and Waddle behind him.
Okay. And speaking of Barkley, just real quick, I know that I get to draft every day, but sadly, you've not moved to Austin quite yet, so you don't. But to let you know, he's going in round 3 now. His ADP is 21, but give it a week and Saquon Barkley will have an ADP in round 3, which I'm with you. I'm going to be drafting a crap ton of Barkley round 3. It's another thing. I let myself take Barkley, Achane, Kyren in round 3 all the time. I prefer those 3 running backs when they fall to round 3 well over the round 3 receivers, but I only let myself do it if I go 2 receivers out the gate.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess by exposure wise, I have drafted Saquon Barkley on 27% of my team. So he is, from a standard redraft perspective, like I have him as a top 12 player. Like he should be going in round 1, in my opinion, not round 2, round 3. Like he should be going in round 1 in standard redraft leagues. So for me, I see the week winning upside of a player that has never been on a good offense in his entire career, who has breakaway speed, receiving upside, goal line upside. Again, people want to argue semantics about Jalen Hurts stealing touchdowns and all this crap. I really don't care because I think Saquon Barkley is an elite running back on a great offense behind one of the best offensive lines in the league. So I will pass on subpar receiver projections for Saquon Barkley specifically, but Achane and Kyren, because I have that stance on Saquon, and I also have the stance that Bijan and Breece in round 1 have legendary, fantasy breaking upside this year. I am very underweight on Achane and Kyren Williams, which scares me a little bit, specifically with Achane because everybody and their mother seems very excited about him. But I'm underweight on those guys specifically because I have concerns about their workload. And if I have concerns about a running back in the first 3 rounds of Underdog, where it's notoriously impossible to draft wide receivers, I will just draft a wide receiver with that pick. I am taking my stance on the first 5 running backs in ADP, more and less so Taylor, mainly the first 4 to 5 there.
Okay. So Henry is someone that I am never clicking unless he falls to round 4.
Same.
Okay. So we're on the same page with that. I would rather have an elite tight end or an elite quarterback than Henry.
Yeah, he scares me too because like if Derrick Henry punched in 19 touchdowns this year, I would not be shocked one bit. I would not be shocked. Even if he averages 3.9 yards per carry on the Ravens offense, he could literally score 18 to 20 rushing touchdowns, and I would not be at all phased. The thing that worries me about him, again, I don't have workload concerns with him at all. I think he's going to get a great workload. I just worry about the age and the touches. I mean, he's already a historical outlier given how many age and like how old he is, how many touches he's already had under his belt. I think he's a future Hall of Famer, and they typically are historical outliers. LaDainian Tomlinson and Adrian Peterson and these guys had similar career trajectories. But I think we're baking in Derrick Henry already having 15 plus rushing touchdowns given this price tag. So if he doesn't, then it's a huge win because I know I can get receivers here and avoid a wide receiver avalanche. And then also too, like, I have a wicked amount of Travis Kelce. I have a wicked amount of Jalen Hurts and those type of guys. So yeah, I'm going to deviate for onesies here too.
Okay. That was my next question because previously when it comes to Laporta, I wasn't drafting him when he was going early round 3, even though I like him there. Like, to be honest with you, if I look at Laporta, I would not be surprised if he outscored Dell, Pittman, Diggs, Kupp, Moore, Metcalf, Neighbors. I think it's possible, especially with no Josh Reynolds. But I wasn't drafting him early round 3. The main reason is because you can get Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid round 5 at the same section of the board. But now that he is instead here, like at the 3-4 turn, and now a lot of times in early round 4, it's the portion of the draft board where Andrews, Kincaid, McBride aren't going to make it back to you. So yeah, I've been letting myself here in this range take a ton of Laporta, Allen, Kelce, Hurts. Very rarely will I take the elite quarterback and the elite tight end on the same team. Unless maybe I went 2 receivers at the gate and I really wanted to mix it up and go like Laporta and Allen. But it just feels awkward. Is there any of those 4 guys are you actually avoiding?
Not on purpose, because player take wise, I have Jalen Hurts as my quarterback 1. So I naturally get more Jalen Hurts than I do Josh Allen. I have Travis Kelce as my tight end 1. So I naturally get more Travis Kelce than I do Sam Laporta. Not to mention, too, I think Travis Kelce's ADP is bound to rise once the casuals start drafting Best Ball Mania teams in August and they see Travis Kelce's name. I would not be shocked if he's back near the 2-3 turn. So I am padding my bags now because I view him as a better projection this year than he was last year. And last year he was a first round pick. So I look at it now like from a schematic football standpoint, you have 2 absolute burners on the outside in Kansas City to stretch the field and open up the field over the middle. Kelce has the exact same concerns he had last year. He's still old. He could still fall off from a talent standpoint. He just dealt with like a minor ankle injury, so people think he's already fallen off, but he was literally still the tight end 1 in points per game last year. So for me, I look at him and I'm like, his projection's the same, only he's 2.5 rounds cheaper, and he's not even going off the board as the tight end 1. And I can get him, like I can draft 2 stud receivers and pair him with another receiver or a good running back projection at the 3-4 turn. And sometimes you even get Kelce later than that.
Yeah. And what's nice too is if Kelce falls to a decent amount in round 4, you always have the chance of the Kelce Mahomes stack.
Yeah. Yeah, you could start with 3. You could start a draft with Justin Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, and Malik Neighbors and get Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes on top of that.
Yeah. But going down, I let myself take, honestly, once we get to this point and the best receivers in the board are McLaurin, Hollywood, Keenan. I think
wide receiver dead zone. It's the wide receiver dead zone. This is like there's multiple fall offs that occur at wide receiver that I like to avoid by drafting wide receivers early. The first fall off point for me is when DJ Moore and DK Metcalf start coming off the board at the top of round 3. To me, those guys are 4th round wide receiver projections being pushed up the board, which is why I often take, a running back there or a quarterback or a tight end there. The next area is the Terry McLaurin, Hollywood Brown types, because I have, from like my redraft ranking standpoint, Etienne, Pacheco, and those guys would be 2nd round redraft picks, slam dunk in any other year. And they're available in round 4 and round 5 in underdog drafts. And I view them as very safe mid RB1 projections that you can pair with a 3 wide receiver start. Like you can start your draft very easily with 3, sometimes even 4 wide receivers or 3 wide receivers in a onesie or something, and still tack on Etienne or Pacheco to give you an RB1 to anchor your hero RB type of build.
Yeah. And my thing with the wide receivers too, especially like starting here with starting with Pickens, honestly. I think T. Higgins just because of his upside. I mean,
yeah. I'm taking a lot of T. Higgins. I think he's appropriately priced for sure.
I think Higgins, Flowers, Dell, like I view them a tier ahead of these guys. But once you get to Pickens, I personally view the wide receiver position all the way the same through Jordan Addison. You know what I mean? I think rounds 4, 5, and 6 receivers are all about the same. So I let myself get a lot of Lamar, a lot of the running backs here. I'm not taking McBride too often, but that's more of a player take. I'd rather have Andrews. I get a lot of Andrews. I get a lot of Kincaid, decent amount of Mahomes. And then it sounds like you're on board with avoiding the wide receivers here. But one thing that I wanted to ask you, because I know you're a worthy guy. Are you in agreement that it's insane that Hollywood goes this early in comparison to Worthy?
Yes, because I think Hollywood Brown is just generally a little overrated as a player. I think you can talk yourself into him pretty easily with like target shares and things that he's done in years past, but he hasn't consistently been a needle mover, nor do I think he will be. So if you're going to swing on a Kansas City Chiefs wide receiver, it should be the one that has the most unknown. That could just be a game-breaking talent. And of course, we know he has like elite speed and that kind of thing. So I actually think that Worthy is appropriately priced, though. I don't think he's like a value or anything. I think he's going where he should go. It's just that Hollywood should go there too.
Yeah, that's what I just have zero Hollywood. I mean, if you look at his contract, if you look at the efficiency over the past 2 years, like I think he is. I think it's like Juju going over to KC and people drafting.
Yeah,
him,
which Juju had some weeks here and there, but and Hollywood will too. But to me, it's like I'm not drafting. Could have some weeks here and there when his quarterback who could break fantasy with 25 points per game is going 1 pick ahead of him, or a tight end in Dalton Kincaid could have a massive breakout year going 1 pick behind him, or Anthony Richardson could have a massive breakout year going shortly after him as well. So for me, like I want to reframe this year on Underdog specifically. I want to reframe the way we think about like pockets of value at position groups by who else is on the board at other positions. Like there's no longer a running back dead zone rounds 4 to 7 or whatever, because the running back projections in that area are RB 10 through 15 in ADP. Before, those running backs were RB 20 to 30 in ADP. RBs 20 to 30 in ADP now going round 8 or 9, where they're not as scary of picks anymore because they don't need to be as good as they would have had to be if they were round 3 to 5 picks like they used to be.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement. I mean, I think the running back dead zone has, I mean, I won the 150,000 on Underdog 2 years ago because I identified that, hey, there's no dead zone anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When every single YouTube channel and their mom has a video titled "Avoid the running back dead zone," there's no longer a dead zone. You know what I mean? Every fantasy football drafter in the world has heard about it. There's no edge in naturally avoiding running backs in the middle rounds anymore, at least personally.
On Underdog, yes. I still think
Yeah.
most of like the dead zone content that we would put out was more so geared towards people in their home leagues where everybody is still drafting. You know, a guy like Derrick Henry, for example, who goes at the mid round 3, sometimes round 4 area of Underdog drafts, he'll go like 202 in those home leagues. You know what I mean?
Home league's definitely different.
Exactly.
Underdog.
Yeah. And like it's challenging because I tweeted this out that more so than any other year, I have not remembered a vast difference between Underdog and sharp home leagues, or in especially casual home leagues. But like the board on an Underdog draft looks so much different than a regular home league draft, more so this year than it ever has. Like before, it was like do Underdog drafts, you'll get a good sense of the sharp ADP and you know where the sharps are taking these players. But now it's gotten to a point where Underdog has its own ecosystem where people are drafting wide receivers simply to not fall behind, and that is never going to happen in a home league draft unless you have 4 wide receiver start, full PPR type of scoring settings, which nobody does usually that's watching content like you and I put out.
Yeah, it's crazy. The typical home league, which I literally like, I don't even know if this was my league back in like 2011. They start 2 receivers, 1 flex, you know,
Yeah.
and have like 6 bench spots where they're the only thing that matters, get an elite tight end, get an elite quarterback, and hopefully you hit on Kyron, you know. But real quick, just a couple. I think we kind of covered what I really wanted to talk about and get your feel on like wide receiver versus the other positions and where it makes sense to begin to deviate. Actually, one other structural question that I wanted to ask you before I have some specific player takes I want to ask you about. More times than not, are you drafting 7, 8, or 9 receivers right now in Underdog?
So I am more often than not drafting 8 or 9 receivers.
Okay.
I know it's kind of suboptimal in terms of the advance rate data from years past, but the reason I'm doing it a lot is because I'm ending up with 3 or 4 really locked down solid wide receivers through the first, 7 or 8 rounds. And then I'm usually fading what I'm going to do a study on this come, a couple weeks from now. The wide receiver dead zone to me is like wide receiver 30 to like 45 in ADP, which again, in years past, they would have been going in rounds 8, 9, 10, 11 or whatever. Now they're going in rounds 5 through 8 or something, which means they need to be so much better than where they used to need to be to return on ADP and produce a positive win rate. So I'm often fading that area, which leaves me behind the 8 ball as like my wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 being like Khalil Shakir, Tyler Lockett, Romeo Dobbs, Cortland Sutton types, which means I'm having to make it up in volume a little bit more than I would like to. Like in an ideal world, I would love to only have 7 wide receivers, but I'm getting such solid running back, quarterback, and tight end projections that I'm often capping off my quarterback, tight end rooms at 2 and capping off my running back rooms at 5, because before I had to draft all these running backs to make up the production I was missing. But now it's like you can run a literal 0 RB and end up with Najee Harris, Zamir White, Jonathan Brooks, and Chase Brown and some other guy. And you just got all the pieces you need for a good 0 RB. You got projectable volume with Zamir White, Najee Harris. You got upside with Jonathan Brooks. You got upside with Chase Brown. You get a handcuff late and you're ready to go. It's like you don't need to draft those profiles as high anymore. So you're able to spend those bullets at wide receiver. And like I've kind of echoed throughout this, I believe hitting on late round wide receivers this year will be absolutely nuclear for advance rates. Like if we get a Puka, like we won't get a Puka. Let's say it's just not possible. If we get a Tank Dell, Jaden Reed, Rashee Rice type of group, maybe they're not rookies, maybe they are rookies. They will make advance rates so high if you're operating the way that I'm kind of operating right now, which is that I'll fill out my other positions early on and get my stabs at stud wide receivers.
Okay. It makes a lot of sense. I'm drafting a lot of 8 receivers as well. My typical thing is a total of 5 quarterback tight ends, whether that's 3 and 2 one way
Right.
or another, 5 running backs, 8 receivers. That's what naturally I'm finding myself doing a lot.
Yeah. I do find quarterback a little bit deeper too. I will say, like, if I'm going to go 3 at one of the onesie positions, it's likely quarterback, because even though there's like a nice pocket of 2 really good projectable quarterbacks, like let's say I miss out on elite guys and I'm like, oh, I'll just double tap Purdy and Tua because I have pass catchers or whatever. I do find it a lot more comfortable to be like, okay, I missed the boat on quarterback completely. This is a room where maybe I drafted players whose quarterbacks go late. Like I draft Garrett Wilson and, players who just don't have highly drafted quarterbacks. And I'm like, you know what? I'm fine with an Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, and Bo Nix quarterback core.
Yeah. I mean,
whereas tight end, I'm a lot more nervous about a Pat Freiermuth, Noah Fant, and Isaiah Likely tight end core than the quarterback version of that 3 build.
Yeah. I find myself getting an elite tight end more times than not. Like
absolutely. I also like grabbing more often than I would think. If I grab, let's say, Dalton Kincaid, I still like grabbing like Dalton Schultz or earlier as my second tight end.
I just put out a video. It's actually probably worth you watching. Just throw it on 2x speed on the main YouTube channel I have called like I investigated the best tight end strategy. It has been good to draft a tight end inside the first 5 rounds or 5 or 6 and follow it up with another tight end inside the first like 10 or 11. So like at least in years past, like literally I just got done with the draft this morning and I took Kincaid round 5 and then I think I took Njoku at ADP wherever he goes,
right?
But it's just like, and then maybe this just goes to me not having enough confidence in myself, but like when we get to the tight end range where like I don't even Isaiah Likely's tight end 23, I don't see a path for any of these guys to do anything.
It's not like last year. It is not like last year. Last year had way more tight ends. In every pocket of the draft, there was better value to be had, in my opinion, specifically around like tight end 15 to 25 in ADP. We had such a great influx of rookies at tight end. That's where Laporta was going. That's where all those guys are going. This year, those guys produced and they're all being priced up. So you don't get discounts on these guys anymore. Like I feel like in years past, like 5 years ago, we had no idea how to price tight ends. Unless the guy finished tight end 1 the year before, we were drafting like terrible old tight ends who finished, like we were drafting Jordan Reed 4 years too long inside the top 5 tight ends in ADP. Do you know what I mean? Like if Jordan Reed had the exact same career he had only in this era, 1 year after he didn't produce, he would have been tight end 19 in ADP, but we were drafting him tight end 4 for like 4 years.
Okay. Actually, let's stick on that because this is something I talked about in the live stream last night. So let me go to a name that I've been drafting that is absolutely disgusting, but I will confess something to you. And my argument was in another era, he would be the worst pick of all time. But now at this point, he is priced appropriately and I'm okay to draft him. Where would Quentin Johnston be drafted 3 years ago?
See, it's challenging because 3 years ago we were less price sensitive on young receivers and like we didn't push them up the board. But at the same time, last year as a rookie, he wouldn't have been priced as high, so the disappointment wouldn't have felt as bad. So you would have been like, oh, he was a developmental prospect, and now he's going into year 2. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, the vacated targets argument is probably what you're referring to when you say he would have been drafted way earlier.
Because my thing is, if you think about like just go back to 2019 when N'Keal Harry just all-time bust, right? Round 1 pick. Especially maybe this is more of a dynasty conversation than a best ball. But what happened a lot, and I found myself doing that, I'm not going to act like I was smart enough and I was way ahead of the curve, is obviously what's been profitable, especially in dynasty over the past 10 years, has been to fade the round 1 rookie receivers that failed year 1. Immediately sell them low, and vice versa. The rookie receivers that performed well, buy them high. Because what we've seen more times than not, I mean, I made videos with all the data tracking DLF, ADP and stuff, is those guys that lost value after year 1, they typically continue to lose value. But the narrative was he was a 21-year-old player. What are you expecting from a rookie? Mike Williams, Keenan Allen are gone, yada, yada, yada. I think Quentin Johnston in years past would be drafted and I know this is going to sound maybe I'm completely off base here. I think Quentin Johnston 5 years ago, we played this out. He's drafted ahead of Joshua Palmer.
I think 5 years ago he would have been drafted ahead of Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, and I'm not saying he should be, but I think that's what would have happened. And now you're seeing him at wide receiver 68. And because this profile has been like the absolute definition of an avoid someone who just completely bust out, I mean, as a massive bust year one, I think there's a chance that this is an overreaction, and I've been drafting Quentin Johnston. So I don't really want to say it publicly, but
no, you're good. It's funny that you're bringing up a Chargers player where there should be a middle ground to their price tag, but there's not, is basically what you're saying. It's like he was going too early before, obviously. That's not what you're arguing, but he's going too late now is what you're saying. It's like he should be going somewhere in the middle of what we thought before and what we think now. I have a player to this exact example at running back who also plays for the Los Angeles Chargers in J.K. Dobbins, who I'm like, everybody is like, literally everybody knows that Achilles tears are bad for running backs. Everybody. Yeah. It's not a secret anymore. It used to be an edge. 5 years ago when the fantasy doctors came onto the scene, they started telling us this stuff. It was an edge to fade Achilles tear running backs because Cam Akers and Marlon Mack and James Robinson, whoever had an Achilles tear, would still go high in drafts. They'd still go in like the 5th round, 4th round of redraft leagues. But you are spending nothing on J.K. Dobbins, nothing. And if he, again, I'm not saying he'll buck the trend of Achilles tear, but he's very athletic. He's been productive when he's been on the field. And hell, the way that Best Ball Mania is structured, you only need him for one game. If he goes off in week 17, which he has been a league winner in Best Ball Mania tournaments before because he had a great end of the season 2 years ago, it's possible that this guy's a massive value. I'm not saying he's going to take over this backfield and be the Chargers starting running back all year, but if it's a timeshare for most of the season and J.K. Dobbins gets healthier as the season goes along and has a big couple spike weeks because this offense is going to run the ball like crazy and they have a good offensive line and a coach that wants to run the ball, and J.K. Dobbins is actually the best pass catcher on this in this backfield too. Crazier things have happened to me than J.K. Dobbins paying off a 17th round ADP.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard you talk about this as well, but with that same thought process, I'm in on Chubb.
I'm in on Chubb too. Again, maybe I'm just stupid for drafting injured players. Maybe I'm just completely stupid. But for me, it's baked in. That's why I'm drafting them.
And my thing too, I mean, we can even pull up Hawkinson. I think all these guys are the same. And what kind of frustrates me about like best ball narratives, everybody understands that the only thing that matters is weeks 15, 16, 17. When people draft their teams in July, they're looking at week 16, week 17 bringbacks. Not saying it doesn't matter. I think for certain tournaments it does, certain tournaments it doesn't. But everybody kind of understands the idea. The fantasy football playoff tournament's the only thing that matters.
Right.
Someone like Nick Chubb, in my mind, is the perfect example of a regular redraft league. Don't waste a roster spot. You know what I mean? But here specifically, if we were trying to draft someone that has upside for those final 3 weeks, getting Chubb at RB 44, I mean, just in comparison to where some of the he's going after Jalen Polk. He's going right before Quentin Johnston, Darnell Mooney. Like, you know what I mean? He is someone that I'm willing to mix in. It would be different if I think Cleveland went out there and they significantly. If Cleveland took Jonathan Brooks, I'm writing off Nick Chubb. I'm not thinking about him. You know what I mean? They signed Deonta Foreman. That was it.
They also restructured Chubb's contract so he could stay too. It wasn't even just that they didn't cut him or they drafted somebody else. They actively made a conscious decision to keep him on the team. And you don't have to convince me on Nick Chubb. I have 19.5% exposure to him. He's like my 6th highest rostered running back. Again, we wax poetic. Week 16 and 17 is all that matters. Is why Keon Coleman and Brian Thomas Jr., without having played an NFL snap, being middling level, 1st round, 2nd round caliber prospects, are literally a guy you have to spend a 6th or a 7th round pick on. Yet a guy that we've seen be a multi-time RB1, yeah, he's injured. Okay, he misses first 6 games, is worst case scenario. Like, he goes on PUP list for Hawkinson and Chubb is worst case scenario for those players. But you're drafting them at a point that it's almost expected that they'll be on PUP list.
I just looked up Chubb and his ADP on ESPN. You want to take a guess?
It's probably like 55.
No, it's lower than that. He's RB 28 on ESPN, comparison to RB 44 on Underdog. And I would make the argument he should be way more valuable on Underdog than he is on other platforms. He's more overpriced. I mean, overpriced on ESPN than he is underpriced on Underdog. But still, I just think it's crazy. Like whenever I draft one of these guys in the live stream and everybody screams at me that they're injured as if I did not know, like same thing with Hawkinson. Looking at where TJ Hawkinson's going. So the tight end that had almost 1,000 receiving yards back-to-back years, So I've been drafting a considerable amount of these injured guys and telling myself, if they have like a lower expected advance rate, but a higher tournament ceiling than a lot of the guys going in their range, that's exactly what I want. I want someone that's not going to be in the tournament a lot, but if I get them there, they have the ceiling to take it down for me.
Yeah, it's all price. It is all price. If TJ Hawkinson was tight end 5 in ADP right now, I would be screaming from the rooftops to not draft him. If Nick Chubb was a 7th round pick and RB 28 off the board, like he probably will be in most of your home redraft leagues, I will be screaming from the top of my lungs not to draft Nick Chubb. But how can we as a community still draft Rashee Rice, who might get an 8 to 10 game suspension with the 68th overall pick or wherever he's going, and say that Nick Chubb, even if he misses a couple games because he's on pup list or whatever, is not a smash pick in a tournament where 90% of the money is only in week 17. Like if Nick Chubb does nothing for 16 games and only goes off week 17, he might be on the winning lineup.
Yeah. I mean, you're making me feel good, my guy. I will tell you that because I do not feel good at all in any of these streams whenever.
It's all price. It is all price, though. If Nick Chubb becomes a 9th round pick, I will not draft him ever again.
Here's another guy that I've been drafting, and I don't even want to pull up my own. I'll pull up my ownership, let you know what it is. And please talk me off the ledge of this one. Eckler RB40.
I haven't been drafting Eckler, but I've been drafting Zeke, so that might be worse. Again, we're at a point now where there's no secrets in fantasy football. Yeah. There's no secrets that old running backs are no longer the bets that they used to be. I used to put out running back age and touch Apex videos. I literally dropped one this week. I dropped one this week on the end is near for these dynasty running backs. Do you know what you used to be able to get for the running backs in those videos in dynasty leagues? You could sell them with ease for first round picks, sometimes multiple first round picks. Yeah. You are lucky to get a mid-second rounder for those players now. So the market in all formats, dynasty, redraft, best ball, we all understand that old running backs are no longer the play. We don't draft these guys with the comfortability anymore that they've done it before. We now draft the young players higher because we know that's the better bet. And I'm not arguing that it's not the better bet. It absolutely is. But when these guys fall beyond a point where their projectable volume, which would have been 4th, 5th round redraft picks in years past, is something that you only get in round 11 and round 12. It's like, I don't need Ezekiel Elliott to drop 15 points per game to pay off that price tag, or Austin Eckler to drop 15 points per game to hit off that price tag. If he is RB24 in, he plays 15 games because he misses a couple games because he's old, and he has 13.2 points per game, he's going to crush his win rate at a 12th round price tag or an 11th round price tag, wherever he's going.
Well, I'm sure. I'm just happy that I can sit here and talk about this with you because, like I said, I respect your opinion and want to make sure I'm not lighting money on fire. Another guy that I am not taking very often because I just prefer where the other quarterbacks are priced instead. Is Anthony Richardson going to bury me here? I'm not. Let me see how much Richardson I have.
He definitely could. He's a scary fade for sure.
I have 7% Anthony Richardson, so it's not that bad. But
I might be less than that. I have less than that. I have 5%.
I have 16% Lamar, 10% Hurts, 8% Stroud. In terms of like the quarterbacks going to range, I have 16% Kyler.
Yeah, I think it's just where he's priced. It's not really a problem I have with him. I think he is a very safe projection to take a step forward. He's obviously a very great athlete who's going to run the ball, and Shane Steichen, I kind of trust him completely, to be honest. It's more so that I only have to pay like 10 extra picks for Josh Allen or Jalen Hurts, or I can get Kyler Murray and Joe Burrow and those guys like 2.5 rounds later. It's real. Like, again, the whole theme of this entire conversation has been market inefficiency. And one of the big market inefficiencies that we used to have was Lamar Jackson after his rookie season being a 13th round redraft pick. It's like we don't have that market inefficiency anymore. If a quarterback can run, they're going high. And Jaden Daniels is a perfect example of that. He's done nothing in the NFL, and I'm actually quite a little bit worried about his situation, and he's still a really high pick. So with Anthony Richardson, it's like he's now being priced at a point where he is going to have to be spectacular to pay off at that price tag, and he very well could be spectacular. I know Lamar Jackson is spectacular. I know that Jalen Hurts is spectacular from like a redraft fantasy point production standpoint. It's like, why wouldn't I just draft those guys?
100%. Let me see my exposures and some other guys I may need to ask about. Already talked about, Addison's my most drafted guy right now, 22%.
Yeah, I think he's a fun one. I wasn't actually drafting a whole lot of him, but I have been pumping my bags on him recently because it's baked in the quarterback play that it's going to be like a combination of Sam Darnold, JJ McCarthy, and everybody kind of knows that like Justin Jefferson's like way better than him. So I don't think anybody's breaking news with that. But like Jordan Addison was performing with like terrible quarterbacks last year, like absolutely terrible quarterbacks. Not to mention, how can we in the same breath say that TJ Hawkinson's a horrible pick and he should be going outside the top 150 and not say that Jordan Addison's a great pick where he's going?
See, that's my thought process. I also think from like a board perspective, round 6 is the last round that I like receivers. You know what I mean? So I think he's kind of like the last guy where once you pass on Addison, good luck on trying to find anybody else. And just to be simple with Addison in my mind, everybody can agree he was a phenomenal prospect. He went round 1 for a reason. He won the Blitnikoff for a reason. He has a great year 1 at a 21-year-old age as a round 1 rookie. That's the exact example of someone that we need to be betting on.
His quarterback missed half the year too.
Exactly. So
he's going to run 700 routes like he did last year too, because he's going to be on the field in 2 wide receiver sets with Jefferson commanding all of the attention.
So let me try to find a couple other guys that I don't want to miss out on the chance to ask you about that I maybe have not been drafting. Hollywood, we already talked about. I'm not taking much Joshua Palmer, which I don't know if I feel good about or not. Kyle Pitts. Let's make Kyle Pitts our last guy. Or Pitts and Metcalf. Let's stay with Metcalf since we're at wide receiver right now. Metcalf's had 3 straight years as the wide receiver, like 24, 25, 26. You know what I mean? We haven't seen anything from Metcalf in 4 years. It's not like Lockett's gone. JSN may get better. I don't know. But I don't feel too bad about not taking Metcalf over Kyron.
Yeah. So my second highest drafted receiver is JSN. So I have been drafting a lot of JSN. I draft Metcalf a half decent amount because I know JSN is like a guy that I go to a lot. So I want to, and if I'm going to draft JSN, I feel like the Seahawks offense probably did well. And, Geno's obviously a backdoor quarterback option for me to double stack with those players. And Lockett's also cheap enough too that I could grab him. But for me with Metcalf, it's like him and Terry McLaurin are very similar, where it's like we once thought that they could be wide receiver 1s in fantasy. Like after their first years, after their second years, we were like, these guys could be studs. And Metcalf actually proved it. He had like a monster year his second season, but they haven't really progressed since then. The only saving grace on Metcalf, which makes me click him occasionally, I would say I'm going to be like a slightly below market when it's all said and done, 6-7% on him, is that Ryan Grubb's offense will air the ball out more, and that directly impacts Metcalf. That would be the only saving grace I have on DK is like, I'm okay with him where he's going. I don't think he's super overvalued. I don't think he's super undervalued. He's also the type of player that is a best ball darling because he catches long touchdowns.
For sure. I will say real quick as you bring up Terry, my favorite stat with Terry, and I say every single year, because I never draft him. I've made a good amount of money fading Terry. He's like about to be 30 years old, and he's never had a higher season than wide receiver 20.
Yeah, he's the precise player you draft if you want 6th place, is what I always say.
I mean, I don't know why people think he's so damn good. I don't know if it's literally a Madden rating. You know what I mean?
He is a good player, and he's definitely better than his fantasy production would indicate. But I also it's not like he got Caleb Williams as his quarterback, or they signed Kirk Cousins and they got a pass heavy coach or something. Like the projection this year is that they're probably going to be middle of the road in terms of pass attempts when they literally were a top 5 team in pass attempts last year. And Cliff Kingsbury, don't really trust him. Jaden Daniels, I had problems with him as a passer. I like his fantasy value for him because he can run, but I don't think he's going to elevate Terry McLaurin beyond the back end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3 he's always been.
Okay, next question. We'll make it the last one unless you have any for me real quick. But I am so damn scared that I'm not drafting Kyle Pitts because I've lost money drafting him 2 years in a row. And now I'm afraid that when he's finally the cheapest with the best quarterback, I'm not drafting him and I'm going to lose money for the third year in a row, but for a different reason.
I'm also worried about that. I was not on Kyle Pitts last year because of the injury concern. The first, like his second year or whatever, I was big on him and I definitely lost some money on it. This year, I think he's appropriately priced. I'm going to be in line with market. That's my attitude on him. I don't want to go super heavy on him. I don't want to go super light on him. That's kind of my attitude. But the thing that makes me pass on him sometimes is that I have George Kittle ranked straight up over him. And he goes higher than George Kittle in ADP. So that's the challenging part for me is that I draft off my rankings, not off of ADP. I keep it in mind, but I don't draft off of ADP.
Okay. Is that Kittle ranking anything to do with the possibility Ayuk has dealt?
No, has nothing to do with it. George Kittle has been a top 3 tight end in best ball points over expectation in 3 straight years because he is a spike week savant. That's what he does. Yeah. He's like everybody who has had George Kittle in a home redraft league knows that he's probably going to drop like 3 points, like 7 games next year.
Yeah, and then he's going to give you he's going to give you probably 2 to 3 weeks with 30 plus points.
Exactly, which is precisely what wins tournaments in best ball, especially if that happens in week 17.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I got a lot. I think that's all I wanted to ask you, unless you have anything else.
I've got one for you because you notoriously won a lot of money on this player specifically.
Jacobs?
I have a obscene amount of Josh Jacobs in drafts right now.
I was not drafting Jacobs at all in round 3, but now that he is in round 5, I have Jacobs ranked straight up over Henry. I just looked it up. I only have 5% Josh Jacobs, but I think a lot of that was to do with he used to go in round 3. Now that he's going in round 5 and he's RB12, I think I would possibly rather have Jacobs over ETN. I'd rather have him over Henry for sure. I think I could even rank him over Achane if it wasn't best ball. So it all comes down to construction because I think Josh Jacobs in my mind is by far and away the best round 5 running back. The reason I think I don't have a ton of him is because, like I said, I wasn't drafting him around 3, and I'm taking a lot of Mark Andrews, I'm taking a lot of Kincaid, and a lot of Lamar. So at the 4-5 turn, I'm taking more quarterback and tight end, but I definitely need to mix in some Jacobs because, ultimately, we know we can catch the ball. I've said that for years.
We know he can score.
Yeah, we know he can score, and he's in a great offense, and he got paid. Like I always look at because I think running back is so much about team actions rather than like perceived talent. That's why I was so in on Josh Jacobs 2 years ago because everybody thought they were like it was the cool thing. Like right now, I would say it is the cool thing. You're not allowed to draft a player that was bad as a rookie. Bryce Young is completely dead. Quentin Johnston is completely dead. It's the cool thing that you're not allowed to take any of these injured guys. If you do any of those things, you are marked as the fish and people make fun of you. So it's difficult to do them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. If the player is getting, again, it's literally all price sensitive.
Yeah.
I wouldn't take Josh Jacobs in the second round probably of a fantasy draft like some redraft home leagues will probably do because they see that he's a guy that's been an RB1 before and he's playing with the Packers and Jordan Love and people get excited about that. But like, even if Josh Jacobs is a 65% opportunity share, he's like top 15, top 20 in the league in terms of his overall role. He has never played in an offense like this. And that's what I keep coming back to with Saquon. Him and Saquon both. I'm just like, they've never played in this good of an offense before. And Jacobs has been a horse, knows how to carry as many touches as he ever could. And he's never needed to be efficient because he gets so much volume. But if he gets the opportunity to not carry so much more volume, maybe he's going to be way more efficient.
I'm in on it, my guy. You got me sold. I'll make sure I start drafting more Jacobs because
he's my highest drafted player. I have 32% of my teams.
And I'll get significantly
just like Brees last year. I'm drafting receivers early because I know I can anchor with Josh Jacobs in round 5. That's why I'm drafting receivers early. It's like, I love Bijan. I love Brees. I love Jonathan Taylor. I love Saquon. And Saquon I'm getting a lot of too. But part of me like fades those earlier round running backs, like I'm not going to draft Jonathan Taylor here because I can draft Brandon Ayuk here and get Jacobs 4 rounds later.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because the range of outcomes with Jacobs and Taylor is probably very similar. Where the range of outcomes with Ayuk versus Hollywood Brown, where Jacobs would go.
Yeah, nowhere
There's
close.
there's no way Hollywood goes out there and laps Ayuk outside of injury.
And Olave, Collins, whatever receiver you like in that area, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
It's the 2v2s to me is like Jacobs could very easily outscore Jonathan Taylor next year, and I wouldn't really be that shocked.
One last thing, I can't believe we didn't talk about this. Houston receivers, where are you at?
I am very much in on Collins at his price tag. I am coming around to Stephon Diggs at his price tag. I know it was the cool thing for a while to fade Stephon Diggs and say that his reception perception numbers were worse, and he's not the same player anymore, but he could have been banged up, could have been the new offense that they had with Buffalo. I still think he's a good player. Even if he's 2023 DeAndre Hopkins, he's probably still going to be wide receiver 18 points per game or something like that. So for me, I'm okay with the Diggs price tag, but I like to only get him when I'm like planning on building a Houston stack and that kind of thing. So I'll be like at market with him. I personally think Tank Dell is overvalued because I think that Collins is a great pick and that Diggs is a fine pick. So if they're fine picks where they're going, one of them's got to be overvalued. And to me, it's Tank Dell because he's probably coming off the field in 2 wide receiver sets.
I'm not going to lie. If I hadn't like done the research for the draft guide, I would be willing to say Dell's a bum. I can't go that far, but he is just such an outlet. He is the only wide receiver we've ever seen at that size do anything in fantasy football ever.
The challenging thing too is had he played 17 games last year and the playoff game too, his numbers might have flattened out to the point that he looks more like Jahan Dotson's rookie season or whatever, maybe somebody better than that, but like Christian Watson's rookie season, as opposed to like the second best rookie wide receiver last year to Puka Nacua, like he currently looks in the sample that we have.
The reason that I'm like, what I found whenever I did the research was if you just look, have you seen his intended air yards per game?
Oh, there is no stat I could point to tell me that it's a safe fade to fade Tank Dell. The only thing that gives me saving grace is the fact that he is going so early that he's going to have to crush.
Yeah. Because I mean, I just naturally assumed, I was like, oh, intended air yards per game, what are we going to be at, 40, 50? And he ran hot. He's over 100 intended air yards per game. So it's like,
no, he's great. He's great, man. Like I think when I look at Tank Dell, thankfully I play in a lot of dynasty or fantasy football formats. I'll get my shares in dynasty. I'll get my shares in home leagues. I'm not taking him in best ball. There's certain players that you're just like, I like their price in this format. I don't like their price in that format. And Tank Dell's one of those players that I'm like, I like him in dynasty. I like him in standard redraft, but I do not like his price tag in best ball. And part of it is because everybody knows stacking is important in best ball too, right? That's also part of why he goes super high. And same with the wide receiver thirst at this on this platform as well.
Well, I'm kind of fine with now. I'm okay with Dell with where he goes, specifically because Stroud, you can get Stroud round 6, and I love Stroud round 6. But real quick, just pulling this up because I haven't seen it before. The ADP just for ESPN home leagues. Diggs is wide receiver 13, Nico's wide receiver 16, and Dell's wide receiver 26. So yeah, home leagues are maybe going to have Diggs and Nico flipped. We'll see.
Yeah, there's no way Diggs should be ahead of Nico. So if the sentiment on Diggs is, where he's going in best ball to me is fine. He's not going in the right spot in home leagues, in my opinion. But Tank Dell too, like wide receiver 26 in ADP might be a 7th round pick in home leagues versus, wherever he's going now, like the late
end of the third
round or wherever he's going. Like I'll take him in home leagues. Like I said, if he's like a 6th round dart throw, 7th round dart throw in a 2 wide receiver, 1 flex league, and you just need upside, take Tank Dell all day.
Yeah. Well, this is perfect. I vote we reconnect and maybe see where boards are. Because I mean, whenever I went to France and came back, boards were completely different. Like I used to hate having a pick anywhere past the top 8. Like I used to hate having pick 11, but now that I can get Laporta early round 4, now that I can get Allen early round 4, I'm like, okay, I'm kind of fine having a late.
It's pick. The puppy. Every time a new puppy drops, the wide receiver ADP climbs.
Oh, really?
That's what I've noticed.
Okay, I have not. Have you? No, I guess you haven't had the chance. Heads up, next time you draft, if if you can get into live drafts, the 15-second timer is significantly better than the 30-second one.
Oh, the mini Schnauzer tournament that's
Yeah,
live right now?
I think that they're gonna roll. Like, so I figured this is what Underdog wanted to do. So once they put out like little like the tests, whatever it was, I figured that they were just like testing it out, saying like, because it makes sense for Underdog to have the shortest timer possible, because more drafts, more rake. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
So I put out like right away a tweet, like just with my opinion, because I think that they are probably, and I'm guessing, going to make it like one of the timers a permanent option, like 10-second, 15-second, 30-second, I mean, 20-second, whatever the hell it is. So I put out a tweet saying like 15 seconds, literally perfect. 10 seconds, probably a little bit too fast. But then Hayden came into the stream. It was like just typing in the chat, getting out a feeler with it. So what my guess is what they're testing is they're going to have like 3 separate timers every time you want to enter into a tournament. It's like, do you want to do a 15-second timer, a 30-second timer, or the 8-hour timer?
Right.
And if we can get you out of Canada one of these days and then into the States, if I could do a good eagle sound, I would. But you can experience a 15-second timer every day, my guy.
Yeah, I mean, we just missed it. We were in Buffalo right before the mini Schnauzers dropped, so I'm in 35 slow drafts right now.
How do you do the slow drafts? I hate them.
They're not as fun. I'll give you that. They are definitely not as fun. I'm very excited for later on in the summer when I get to go to the States a couple more times. I'm hoping I can go out for one more time in July, and then I'll be obviously in the States later in August. So
yeah, well, when you're here, we're gonna I'm gonna try to get one. Everybody needs to bring their recording stuff. We need to just record 1,000 videos with everybody when everybody's here, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And 2, whenever I do the Underdog streams every night, I'm gonna try to get like a stream set up where if you look at like the real professional streamers like Kai Cenat and stuff, that it just like shows the entire room and it's like a hangout thing. I'm gonna try to do like the streams there so y'all can like pop on and like we can talk like that.
The room with the guitar and the karaoke setup appears to be the spot to do that.
Oh no, that's where we need to do, like, if we do the live draft at the house, that's where we need to do it. Like, throw it in that little corner. It'll be nice.
Yeah.
But appreciate you, my guy.
Yeah. This was fun. I don't get to talk about my exposures very often because I'm either doing a draft or I'm like, I can't draft because I'm in Ontario. So it's like we're either ghost drafting through Spicy or whatever. But I hear all these like, spoiled folks that get to do fast drafts all the time being like, yeah, recently in my fast drafts, I've been taking this approach. And I'm like, I really wish I could do this more often.
Yeah, definitely. Here, let me